And in content area 10, we have Pepón Osorio, who is a Puerto Rican artist. Actually, Pepón Osorio is a very interesting case. So Puerto Rico becomes a colony of the United States, even though the US refuses to use that term. In 1898, it is still a territory of the United States to this day. So the Puerto Rico-US relationship is one that's very fraught, and a lot of people don't really understand. So Puerto Ricans have been citizens of the United States since 1917 under the Jones Act. Some historians have hinted at 1917 being a magical date. Does anybody know what was going on worldwide in 1917? World War I. Yeah, specifically the US decides to enter and needs bodies. Some people have debunked that. That's something that's very much debated amongst historians. But it just kind of happened that they magically, you know, the dates coincided. So I'm just going to say that. I'm not going to say I agree or disagree, but I'm going to say it's interesting. So the US was going to enter World War I and needed bodies. And back then, you were drafted. So my grandpa is a Korean War veteran without ever wanting to go to war. We have artist Pepón Osorio, who is active in Philadelphia. He's Puerto Rican. He's actually a social worker. So when we talk about his work, that's going to be really important because his take on art is very different from an artist, I think. So he's a trained social worker. He was a practicing social worker. Now he's teaching out of Temple University. He's affiliated with the art department. Pepón Osorio's body of work in general connects a lot with social justice, access, and debunking stereotypes.
Can you say those again?
Social justice, access, so like equality, and debunking stereotypes. If we have time, I'll play a clip. He's on Art 21. So there's a really great Art 21, and I wanted to show a video because, so when Pepón Osorio creates this piece, it's a grant that he wins, and he selects a specific location in this area that has a large Puerto Rican and African American population that was facing lots of hardship. They had, high illiteracy rates. So the negative stereotypes that get associated, high illiteracy rates, and a lot of single moms are two of the big problems that he was facing. And as a social worker, whenever he enters a site, he's about making true change. So he doesn't just show up and does a cool art project like a lot of people do when you think about, community work. He's actually about making a difference in people's lives. So this piece has many different levels to it. It's very personal to him. He talks about masculinity within the barbershop, and it goes back to memories of himself as a child. The first time he got a haircut, he cried, and he got told, there's no crying allowed in the barbershop, right? Man up. He talks about, he's Afro-Puerto Rican, so he talks about his afro and how they pulled his hair. So we have aspects of masculinity and race coming in. And so he creates this faux barbershop. Let me show you. This is the storefront. So they actually create a barbershop. In collaboration with the community. And the barbershop is open and people could hang out. You could have haircuts, and people actually started using it as a site. Because he's a social worker, he also started holding workshops and talks in it to talk about the problems that were gnawing at the community, right? So for example, why were so many of the men getting their girlfriends pregnant and running away, right? How does this tie into machismo, right? as a macho, right, I just get a woman pregnant and leave her behind, right? So he's trying to get at the root of all of these social problems. So I really love this project. I think it's a project that truly does try to push for social change, and I think a lot of his projects open up really great conversations rather than him parachuting and then leaving the area.
Still there?
No, so this piece, unfortunately, sorry, I went the wrong way. This piece is now owned by the Museum of Puerto Rican Art in Puerto Rico. So if you decide to go to Puerto Rico, you can see it. Unfortunately, it's no longer an interactive piece. So when it first opened, you could move around it and play with it. If you look at the different chairs, they're inspired by boys' pastimes. So there's like a basketball, baseball chair, right? They're, you've seen a Yankees, right? New York Yankees, baseballs, things that are associated with boys, masculinity. Throughout the installation, on the top of the chairs, he has TV monitors with videos of men crying without audio, because men are not supposed to cry. He's painted the walls in pink, which I think is quite funny. Let me go back to the first image, right? So here we have the wall in pink, but he has a kind of a tattoo theme going on, right? With the roses, the bullets, and then it says, perdóname, so pardon me, you know. Throughout the walls, he has photographs of very well-known African-American and Latino, and I should explain what Latino is since I've mentioned it a couple times, and Latino or Puerto Rican athletes or celebrities. And so I've mentioned Latino a few times, and do we know what I mean by Latino, what the difference is? Because I was talking about Latin America before this, and now I just totally code switched on you and I said Latino. Anybody? So Latino we usually use to, as when we're referring to people of Latin American descent in the United States. The government loves the word Hispanic. I despise the word Hispanic. So they usually make reference to a similar thing. It's an umbrella term. It makes things easier for the government to manage us, right? When you're when you're just a homogenous body of people, rather than asking you your individual racial or ethnic background, right? Hispanic, Latino, easy, we're done with it. But in Pepón Osorio's case, he specifically is Puerto Rican. But he plays, a lot of his work goes against stereotypes of Latino, Hispanic men and associations with violence. Incarceration is one of his favorite themes. He has some great work specifically that focuses on violence. But this one again, stereotypes, and it's interesting how it connects to him personally, right, his background, but also to the area, the people, very much understood what he had gone through. Are there any questions about? There's a lot of silence on this one.
With the sculpture.
Saint Lazarus. So this is Saint Lazarus, and Saint Lazarus, if you're talking about Santeria in Catholicism, he's a very famous figure among Puerto Ricans and Cubans. He's got a dog and he's on crutches.
So
San Lázaro.
Is he exclusively an installation artist, or does he do often?
We have a piece of him downstairs. He does a lot of installation work, but he does a lot of kind of sculptural work. Yeah, he loves kitsch. And as we can see the chair, he's playing off of the idea of kitsch and cheap trinkets. The chandelier you'll see downstairs is another one that's going to be full of little cheap, like dollar store type trinkets that talk about childhood memories, but also, right, these have to do with childhood memories, but also access to goods, right? They're little cheap trinkets, stuff that just about anyone can afford.
When you had the other picture, there were the roses, and you said there was a reference to tattoo parlors.
To gang tattoos.
To gang tattoos,
Yeah.
the roses.
Yeah, so you see like gang tattoos or...
Because then underneath we're seeing what looks almost like pop art bullets, is that right? Is that what we're seeing beneath the roses? Yeah. Or those
I wouldn't call them pop art, but if we were talking about tattoos, this would be Americana style.
But are those bullets, or is that a tattoo?
Those are bullets.
Okay.
So that would be like a tattoo. If you were in a gang, you have a rose tattoo with your bullets. That's your like badge of honor.
Got it.
Probably I killed someone, right? The bullets probably represent. And he has another piece called Badge of Honor. Sorry, that's why I kind of threw that one in. That has to do with gang violence, and it's really good. So I highly recommend watching his Art 21. He's fun and eloquent, and his work is very beautiful because of this whole, social justice component to it that I think misses in a lot of art. It has come up, I've had debates with friends about whether or not this is true art.
And what do they say?
Because they think it's activism and this should not be considered art. So art should just be beautiful. So it goes back to the arts for art's sake debate. And I'm like, oh, come on. What century are we in? And like I said, it's an installation piece. You were actually encouraged to use it back then. Now I'm just going to show you a shot of it. And here we see a pool table, right? So manly things macho men do. So if you go to the Museum of Puerto Rico, you can see it, but probably from about this distance, you can't walk through it, unfortunately.
So did they just take all the objects and then just
reinstalled it?
rebuild the room?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm not sure how identical the layout is going to be.
So are they plates across the top?
Those are, hubcaps. Yeah, because if you're macho, you have cars, right? It's about racing and who has the most tricked out car.
Yeah, there's flowers everywhere.
Yeah, well, those would be lowriders, and that's a Mexican-American tradition. So that's a different one. But tricked out cars, all boys. That's a cross. Most men love cars and playing on them, fixing them up.
When you said that when he installed it, they actually used it, like, how many people are you talking about would go in and...
Up dozens of people, just the community. They would hang out outside if it was closed, they would just hang out on the steps, on the stoop, and just drink soda and hang out and talk. And when it opened, people would just go in. And he also encouraged them, right, by holding, not lectures, but I guess discussions. And so it invited you to go in, and at one point, apparently, barbers just started bringing their electric shears and just giving people cuts. And that's what he wanted, right? This community involvement. And he didn't want to be like this foreigner, right, this foreign person from the area that comes in. And I'm a big fan.
Did he grow up in that neighborhood?
He's Puerto Rican. This is in the state. Well,
How did he choose to come to Connecticut?
It was a grant he got in the area, but he also was looking for areas in which he felt he could make a change, a difference.
Okay.
And one interesting aspect about Pepón Osorio's work is that he's become really famous, but he tends to prefer to show his work first in community-based spaces and have his work be accessible to the community. And I'd said the community is very involved in producing if he does something like this, rather than going to a mainstream museum. He's very connected to the people rather than to the elites that we tend to associate with museums. And not all of his work are installations, but when he does like community-based projects, the community's involved since the very beginning. So he's fun.
Where's the largest concentration of Puerto Rican?
New York.
It is New York. But he wasn't showing in New York.
This is Connecticut. I mean the East Coast. Yeah, sorry. So I'm just like the East Coast. So so New York historically has been the biggest site. I'm not sure if it's shifting to Florida. I think Florida has a really big, and if you probably remember the elections last year, the Puerto Rican population was a really important target for both political parties because they knew, people always say Cubans, but the Puerto Rican population has grown so much, they really needed to get the Puerto Ricans on board.
Puerto Ricans voted that they want to become a state.
That's a completely different talk. And that's highly debatable and still contested to this date. Chicago has a large population too. So the East Coast historically, but Chicago. And Hawaii. A lot of Puerto Ricans were hired as field workers because the crops are identical. So you didn't have to train anybody on how to grow pineapples or tend to sugarcane. And there's a lesser known group of, I think it was in the 20s or 30s, that came throughout the Southwest. They just mixed with a lot of the Mexican American population, intermarried. And because the name was different, similar, the names are similar in the customs, they had affinities, and people don't know or care about the difference between the different groups. They just kind of got lost. But there's a really great project. There's a Puerto Rican artist who's been working on the Mexican and Puerto Rican connections. And I brought him, he was here when I was teaching here. I brought him to talk about it.
This is not historical either, but I just finished Sonia Sotomayor's memoir, and she speaks about the Puerto Rican neighborhoods in New York.
And when she was nominated, if you listen to the news, they'll say Sonia Sotomayor of Puerto Rican immigrant parents. Puerto Rican immigrant parents, and then that's completely wrong because Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens, right? Yeah. What's his name? The British guy on HBO. John Oliver had a really funny piece on the territories and how people don't think about them as citizens.